our full board for action until September. This evening, we have 4 agenda items. The first is a presentation from Lucas Wolf and Elizabeth Bird from Scott Stringer's office. They're going to be talking about this Comptroller Stringer's strong school plan, and we'll use this to educate the committee on the Comptroller's approach to safely reopening schools. Bex is going to have a lot more on schools at our next meeting, so this presentation is not an action item for this evening. The second item we have on the agenda is the parent coordinator, Patricia Laria from the School of the Future. Patricia is going to talk to us about some of the issues facing her school and in her particular request for open streets for School of the Future. They want to access some parking spaces in front of the school for peak times. Obviously, this crosses a little bit into our transportation committee, so we'll hear this as a potential letter of support and we can then forward that to transportation. Our third item is we're going to hear from Abigail Bessler from Councilmember Power's office. She's going to discuss the small business tax credit against the commercial rent tax bill that is put forward by Councilmember Powers. Members of the committee probably will recall that Councilmember Powers came and he spoke to us about this bill right before COVID, and that's about the commercial tax that affects businesses below 96th Street. You'll probably recall that we were about to support that bill with a resolution. It was drafted and then COVID came along. And so we were waiting to see what would develop with regard to that bill. So here we are now. We can discuss the adoption of a resolution that's in line with the new updates, if in fact that's what we decide to do. And finally, we're going to discuss the proposed resolution that's been circulated, which is a compilation of our conversation and views on the NYPD and the budget. Joseph Frewer and July and Rob and Joe did Trojan's work on that. You'll recall our conversation in the meeting, not the last meeting, but the one before that, on the NYPD and the budget. And they've distilled that into a resolution that we will look to adopt this evening. Quick overview of how the committee works. Each presenter will speak about their issue, and after the presentation is concluded, the committee will be permitted to ask questions of the presenter. When all the committee's questions have been answered, members of the public will be able to ask questions of the presenter, and then once all those questions have been addressed, the committee will go into business session. And that's when only members of the BEX committee discuss the issue amongst themselves and determine what action to take. We're somewhat different by I mean BEX, than other committees within Community Board 5 in that we don't have applications, so that our determinations are not as straightforward. We can decide to draft a resolution. We may decide to seek further information or use the presentation to inform our collective knowledge. And we're going to do that tonight, for example, on the issue of safe schools. If we do decide to draft a resolution, it'll be voted on by all present members of BEX. And then if the resolution passes amongst us, it'll be presented for CB5 board for a vote. And then that vote is the full position of the board. As I mentioned, our next full board meeting is September 10th. So anything we do tonight will not be heard in action by CB5 until that time. We have a lot to do tonight. So with that, I will kick it off and begin with Lucas and Elizabeth.
Hey everybody, I'm Luke Wolf from Comptroller Scott Stringer's office. We also have Elizabeth Bird, who is our education policy expert on the phone as well. So together we'll be kind of presenting some of our thoughts around school reopening. I want to start by thanking Renee and Julie and the rest of the committee for inviting us to share more around our thoughts. We know right now schools are top of mind for everyone because there's just the number of people and families and children it impacts. And we all know the experience that so many had in the spring with remote learning and how many flaws, whether it's the technological process, on the learning side, with meals, with kind of everything in between. And we kind of took all that feedback and all we heard from across the city and boiled into a number of different recommendations for how we think it's a path for schools to reopen safely and also prioritize quality instruction going into the fall. I'll let Elizabeth jump into more on that in a second. But I also kind of want to preface that these are our office's recommendations that we've sourced from talking to a number of different stakeholders, families, students, teachers, kind of across the educational spectrum. They are not what the DOE is rolling out. We are pushing the DOE to adopt some of our recommendations, which I think will be aligned with some of the things that the BEX committee has come out with or will be coming out with, at least I hope. but these are things that we are pushing as our office based on our experience and conversations. We probably have many of the same questions that you all have about how school will look in the fall. I think we also wish that we had more answers, as do so many students and families from across the city. So as we keep on pushing and finding out more, we'll certainly let you guys all know. And if there's certain things that you all want us to push on, or think that, hey, this is something that is not currently in your plan, but something we're hearing about, and really think that should be part of your plan, folks, going forward, please let us know. I hope that this is not just us answering questions and our thoughts, but you also hopefully giving us some good ideas that we can borrow and move the ball forward on as well. On that note, Elizabeth, I don't know if you want to go through some of our plans, some recommendations, and some of our work on reopening more broadly.
Sure. Yeah, and I can just preface it by saying, again, reiterating the fact that this is not a representation of necessarily the Department of Education's plans. In fact, we were huddling with a lot of parents and education experts and, different people who wanted to sort of give us input, I think, wanting to provide some of their concerns and asking our office to make recommendations to the Department of Education ahead of their releasing any plans. And so when we, released our set of recommendations, it was in the spirit of, hoping to provide guidance and feedback. In some ways, a lot of, I feel like even though this was, like about a month ago, it feels almost like ancient history because so much has happened. This in that time period, the state has released its guidance on reopening schools and more clarity around requirements. And then obviously the Department of Education has made a set of different announcements. I don't need to go into every single recommendation, but I thought it maybe would be helpful just to kind of guide through the way we thought about school reopening in terms of two separate sets of recommendations, one on safety and prioritizing how to actually reopen schools safely, and then another set of recommendations for ensuring strong instruction and hopefully addressing and mitigating some of the troubles that happened in the actual instructional portion of the school year last year as everybody shifted to remote learning. So in the reopening schools safely, it's a lot of what you would probably expect, talking about the necessity to wear masks and establish small cohorts of students. One thing that we have really been pushing the city on is to look into pooled testing, where numerous groups of a group of students could all provide a sample test, and then that test result is one test is basically performed for an entire pool, and it's a way to more inexpensively, I guess, run a lot of tests, and then you can go back and trace any positive results. Obviously, also having a full-time nurse on staff. I know this is a concern for a lot of families and is not getting as much attention as I thought it would, that there is a real shortage of nursing staff, and it's something that we've been talking to the administration about, not just in this set of recommendations, but in subsequent communications that we've had with the mayor's office as well. And then one thing that has actually gotten a lot of attention is on the need to identify more outdoor spaces for learning activities. And again, this is under that bucket of safely reopening schools. We know that virus transmission has been lessened significantly with being outdoors. And so we've included that as a recommendation. We've been really discouraged that the mayor has seemed to be very dismissive in a way of the possibility, but I think that this is something that has gotten a lot of attention, a lot of support from parents. And, you know, we'd love to see the city be more creative in ways that it could expand the use of outdoor spaces for learning activities. And, you know, again, I'm not going to go through every single recommendation. There are, you know, many, but you know, that's kind of a summary of some of the ways that, you know, we wanted to encourage the safe reopening of school buildings. In terms of ensuring strong instruction, there's sort of a separate set of recommendations. And they really largely focus on the need for additional staffing and childcare capacity. I think in terms of thinking of teachers in a blended learning model, needing to provide support to students in both a remote learning environment as well as in the classrooms, and potentially having groups of students in different parts of the building at the same time, it definitely feels like the city is at a critical point where we need more staff in schools. And it seems like potentially a great opportunity to establish a hiring pipeline and let this be a potential job professional development and professional training program for, you know, bringing people into classrooms. They obviously would need training and professional development, but additional support could be helpful. We included a recommendation on a scheduling model. We had heard from several people who were very convincing about the idea that a split schedule would be really helpful as an option for schools, having students, one group of students come every morning, one group of students come every afternoon, with a break in the middle of the day to clean classrooms. This has not been adopted by the city. It's not something that seems to be even really remotely under consideration. I know that there are a lot of logistical challenges to any of the scheduling options, but, you know, our office was really compelled by the evidence that having a regular touch point to the day is ultimately one of the most important things you can give students. But understandably, it seems like it's not something that has received a lot of support from the administration. And lastly, I'll just say the needs for sustaining the childcare sector. I think we are, you know, really hearing this. Our office has definitely been hearing this from families that their ability to imagine another school year where there is remote learning or blended learning and trying to return to work, there needs to be a bigger, bolder investment in childcare, and the childcare sectors really struggling. So we included some recommendations there as well. And then very, very finally is the need to invest more in high quality remote learning. I think so many people who have gone through this experience have had the main consistency has been the variety of experiences. And it's really been telling that, you know, it's not even school by school, but teacher by teacher, how their experience was with remote instruction, and wanting to be able to level the playing field, knowing that remote instruction, no matter how schools reopen in the fall or whether they reopen in the fall, what is sure is that there will be some ongoing dependence on remote instruction, and really needing to push the city to make that a high quality experience as possible. Of course, that means every student needs access to a device and reliable internet. But it also means that there needs to be a real baseline for instruction, for outreach, for professional development for teachers. There are ways to make remote instruction better, and it's not, you know, again, this is something that we've pushed the city on in a few different times and places, and I think we'll need to continue to follow up with them to find out more about the data that has been made available or that has even been tracked at all from the fall. I think that's could really help us in framing the need for more consistency across the board. So that's a kind of an overview of a framework of our, you know, our set of recommendations. I think, you know, I don't want to devote too much time to it, but it's obviously it's available. Happy to share the link to the report and field any questions at all.
Thank you so much.
Just,
sorry, Luke.
Thank you. So I dropped the link in the chat to both our report as well as op-ed calling for use of more outdoor space. And Elizabeth touched on, but I think one of the things that we're really thinking about as an office is unprecedented. Before I worked as a controller, I was a teacher for 3 years at a high school in the city, and jobs already up. And especially with all these other things going on, it really it needs to be an all hands on deck effort, and there's transparency of communication kind of early and often. But I think the one thing that we're really hoping for is more creativity in that how we test students to ensure schools are safe, how we staff up schools, how we conduct remote learning. Obviously, we need to follow the best evidence and pedagogical knowledge available, but this is unprecedented. We need to kind of borrow from what we've seen work and not work around the city and around the world, but also really be able to get creative in terms of if there's an open street outside of the school, how can we use that as not only a place to sit into a classroom, how can we reimagine what an outdoor learning experience could look like? If there's a park across the school, across the street, how can that become a science lab for students? So we're not just saying, okay, we're going to take what's going on inside and move it outside, but also make it so that we're having the most enriching possible experience for students throughout this whole process. So I think that's just kind of something we're thinking about as well, is how can we make sure that we're not just doing the bare minimum here in opening schools, but also making it the best possible experience, because these are students, and every single day they have a chance to kind of get the education they deserve. And even though everything's going on in the world, we need to do the best that we can to give them that opportunity. So on that, I don't know if Elizabeth, you have anything else or any questions from the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. Could everybody on the bottom, you can see the raise hand function. Does anyone have any questions for Luke and Elizabeth? Rachel.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Thank you so much for all of that information. I think there's a ton of great ideas there. And so thank you. I'm wondering if your office has thought about metrics and measuring success of remote learning and how we track student outcomes in the next year or years. It seems to me like a lot of the ways we track progress and measure progress at various schools will need to be adapted. And I have not really seen much about that in terms of best practices. So wondering if that's something your office has thought about at all, or if you've heard of kind of any work that's being done around the city on that.
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. That is something that we have, I mean, like, I know that the way the Department of Education so far has been monitoring, like just basic student attendance is really not what you or I might think of in terms of what attendance is. It's tracking student engagement, which could be anything from, you know, turning in an assignment on Google Classroom to, you know, a phone call to a parent that, you know, was picked up and a dropped call, but there was some connection with a parent made, that would still account for engagement. So I do feel very much the same, like I don't have a full understanding of how we're measuring progress and how we're improving the collection of metrics. It is something that we have communicated, a concern that we've communicated to the city on a few different points. And I guess to answer the question, I think we would like to know more about standards around synchronous instruction, more about how they will track actual attendance and engagement. And, you know, after that, just like wanting to know what are best practices that are, you know, being promoted by educational experts in other arenas. Luke, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think that unfortunately, the data collection and consistency isn't what we'd hope for, where we're still kind of in the, okay, how many students are checking in each day on remote learning platforms, and what does that kind of timing look like, where the conversation around, okay, what sort of learning is actually being done, what sort of learning standards are being met, it is just so incredibly varied across schools and classrooms and students that I think we're unfortunately still kind of in the very basic questions of how many students are regularly accessing it every day, and out of that number, how many are logging into all their periods, how many are regularly checking their Google Classrooms, and just kind of the very basic metrics. I would love to have a more robust conversation around what does a great digital learning experience actually look like, but I think unfortunately, even at this late time when we had months of virtual learning, we're still not quite there yet.
Do I see any other raised hands? Thank you, Luke. Any other questions? I have a question. It's around the social workers in the schools. That's something that I believe the mayor had committed to, and I thought the mayor had committed to that. I know that many community boards and other people were supporting that initiative a year or so ago. Are we far from that? How many schools are we talking about that still do not have social workers in their schools?
This is a really good question, and I know that that this actually was one of the matters that kind of came up in the last minutes of the budget negotiations. So it's something that I need to go back and check on. Yes, it's true that there has been a commitment to have a social worker in every school. I actually don't know if that is something that will be accomplished or not. I do know that some of the special programs like the Bridging the Gap social workers who work specifically with students in temporary housing, as well as the single shepherd social workers who are assigned to students in certain middle and high schools in specific districts. I know those two programs have been funded for the coming year and survived. But in terms of additional funding, I'd have to go back and check.
One thing I would add is that recommendation is something that we called for in our school report, is to make sure that every school has a social worker ready and on staff this year. We think it's probably something that should have happened long ago, but especially now more than ever, when there's been so much different types of trauma so many students have gone through. It's even more important for them to know there's someone in the school building that trusted adult and trained adult who they can turn to in those situations. I'll try to find the data and send it over your way because I don't have that on hand, but definitely something that we need to keep pushing on right now.
Thank you. Do I have more questions? Any more questions from the committee? I'm looking for raised hands. I don't see anything. I just have one last question. You talk about social emotional learning. Many nonprofits who work with children, particularly sports-based youth development organizations, focus on social emotional learning as part of their curriculum. Have you thought about partnering when you need more of these people in the classroom? And you've suggested, I think in the plan to add more people into the classroom. Is a partnership among some of those non-for-profits on the table or something you've considered?
Yes, totally. I completely agree that Like when we talk about the need for more staffing, you know, sort of one of our sub recommendations was something that could definitely be built out into something more prominent is leveraging the many community-based organizations that work with youth throughout the city and who have, you know, many of these organizations are without contracts or their contracts, you know, had to be ended mid-year, or they thought they would have summer programming through, you know, some of the summer programs, and then, you know, permitting has been kind of a nightmare from what I've heard. I think that's an absolutely such a vital resource in terms of the community-based organizations and the youth development groups that work across schools and this and across the city, and that the city should really leverage that valuable resource. Totally agree.
I'm looking for any hands, any further questions for Elizabeth and Luke from the committee? I seeing none, I'm going to turn to the attendees. I don't know, Luke, is that a raised hand function, or is that that's something?
There is. So attendees, if you'd like to participate in this item, please find the raise hand button at the center of your screen.
Okay, seeing none, I'm going to thank you very much, Elizabeth and Luke, for attending the meeting this evening. You've given us a lot to think about. We're hearing more and more, obviously, education and the reopening schools is something that's evolving. And so CB5 continues to take it all in, and we appreciate you coming and explaining and answering our questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you all.
Okay. Next up, we have Patricia Larios. She is the parent coordinator at School of the Future. Patricia, I hope that you will talk to us a little bit about what School of the Future is thinking about in terms of reopening, and very specifically about your request regarding open streets.
Thank you, Renee. And thank you for that title, but I'm a parent sitting on the SLT at School of the Future.
I'm so sorry. I apologize.
No, it's fine, it's fine.
You've just been so active with them, so.
Yeah, well, I have a 10th grader that's going to be a rising 10th grader that's going to be attending hopefully in the fall. And there was a lot of parents working with the principal, Stacy Goldstein, to troubleshoot like potential issues that may arise with the reopening in the fall. And what we've come up with, just to give you background, there are 700 students pre-COVID that were in attendance. It's a 6 to 12 middle and high school, which is located at 127 East 22nd Street. And we were hoping that CB5 would help with the open, you know, like we wanted to do a play street. It's located on 22nd Street, but we don't want to shut 22nd Street down between Lexington and I think it's Park. Because that's a major thoroughway, I guess, going through. So what the mayor and the governor have done with restaurants is they've got open streets in front of their businesses, like they take 2 parking spaces in front of their businesses. So we're hoping for a partial play street, like taking 2 parking spaces in front of where our building is on the footprint of the building on Lexington and on 22nd Street for when the kids are coming in peak times at drop off and then at dismissal. To keep the staff, the children and community as safe as possible. We'll triage the kids there, like, you know, right before the doors open to kind of line them up. The other thing is we were hoping to do this, I guess, Monday through Friday, because with the different cohorts that they're going to potentially have in the fall, we're going to need that time every day to do this work. And usually when you apply through the DOT for a play street, you need the support of the community board. That's why I'm here this evening to ask for your help with that, as well as the NYPD. and the Department of Transportation, because we have to apply for it, and then you guys will help after we, put in the application to help with that. We also, besides that, we've also put in through the Department of Transportation app for more bike racks, because then a lot of the teachers and I'm sure the students are going to be biking. And I don't believe currently there are any bike racks in front of the school. And so we're going to need that on Lexington Avenue as well as on 22nd, and the footprint of the building. And I think, oh yeah, and the other thing is to address what Luke was saying earlier, that they are trying to think creatively of having the kids outdoors more. We're hoping that we could walk the kids to like Madison Square Park or Union Square so they can be outside. So we're trying to think creatively of how we can do this with the teaching staff. So those are our requests and hopes for the fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Do any members of the committee have any questions for Patricia? Use the raise hand function. Rachel.
Thank you so much for sharing. Just wondering if you've heard about other schools having similar requests. Like, is this something that you've heard about other schools like getting approved by the relevant parties?
Well, I live in Community Board 2, which is the West Village, but my son travels to School of the Future, which is on the east side near Madison Square Park. And on Community Board 2, where I'm on the Schools and Ed committee there, we've PS3, which is a local elementary school that services over 800 kids, they have a play street. And they came to us requesting that the play street, around that play street still, as well as the one behind it, the footprint of the building. So they want Grove Street as well as Bedford Street to triage the kids. And they do have a rooftop, but they're trying to utilize all the spaces around. They have it. 75 Morton, which is a zoned middle school, is going to be requesting on Morton Street for Play Street as well. The other elementary school that is in our zone is also reaching out to us, PS 130, which is downtown in Chinatown. They also are requesting because they have a similar request. So there's a lot of schools that have come to us and reached out that they really would like this, because it says that the kids need to be outdoors more. They need to have like fresh air, not the recycled air that they'll be having inside. And majority of these buildings are old buildings. They're not new buildings that you have like the AC and so forth. And it's gonna be hot still in September and October. Does that answer your question, Rachel?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Any more questions for Patricia? I just have a quick one, Patricia. Are you able to utilize the, I don't know if you can get to it from the outside, the playground there, the basketball courts on the side of your school?
Am
I thinking of the right?
For School of the Future, my son has never talked about a basketball court near there. There's only Madison.
Something, yeah. Ignore the question.
Yeah, the nearest park is Madison Square Park, and there are no courts. It's just like for little kids, the little playground in there. But I'm
right. And just for the edification of the committee, I want to let you know that this has been obviously this request crosses over into the Transportation Committee. It also crosses over to Parks to the extent that you had requested some connection to Madison Square Park potentially. So we have notified both Parks and Transportation, just so our committee is aware of that. Evan, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just had a quick question, Patricia. Do you mind just repeating what the process is for applying for Play Street? Yeah.
There's an application through the Department of Transportation, and that's where we would put in our request in writing through the school. The school would have to put it in. And once we do that, we'll send a copy to your committee as well as the Parks, you said, Renee?
For DOT, it would be Transportation.
It would be Transportation, okay. So it's, yeah, we put in an application to the Department of Transportation for a play street, but it would be a partial play street in front of the building. We don't want to shut down 22nd Street. Because, do you know where the school is in your area? Because 22nd is like a major artery, and I've seen big trucks and stuff on there, so I doubt that they'd want us to close the entire street. It would be perfect, but it wouldn't be useful for that block.
And that's the same process, again, for the committee that you have gone through for the bike racks.
Yes, yes,
So DOT has a form that schools can just fill out and submit.
yes.
Any further questions from the committee? Any questions from attendees? Please use your raise hand function. Seeing none, we're going to move into business session and discuss moving forward on this support of the application of School of the Future for, again, this crosses over into other committees. School of the Future is a school, so Budget, Education, and City Services. We would pass our recommendation on to the Transportation Committee. But here we're going to discuss our support or not supporting their requests.
Thank you.
Thoughts? Any thoughts from the committee? Are people generally in support of opening up play spaces for schools like School of the Future, taking parking spaces to allow the kids to assemble both before and after school for check-in and dismissal? Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, I think in line with our previous presentation, we have to get creative. I think it's obviously a great idea, and we're doing it for restaurants. And so I think if we were to go out there and say we can't do this for kids' safety, then that's pretty problematic to think about prioritization. So it makes sense to me. I can't, it'd be helpful to like see a map of the area. I can't picture it in my head. But I think as long as everything kind of checks out with that, then I'm in general very supportive.
Thank you. Any other comments from the committee? Kim?
Yeah, agree with Rachel, and in general, very supportive of play streets. I, of course, just want to make sure that safety is a priority as well if we're talking about partial usage. But otherwise, 100%.
Fabulous. Any other comments? Thank you. Zach?
Hey, so sorry if I missed this. Did she say the hours that they were requesting to have the streets open for play?
Patricia, the hours, I'm not sure if it says it on the application. I'm not sure.
When you put in for an application for a play street, you would shut down the entire street for the like the drop off and or dismissal. Or sometimes where in the case of PS3, they shut the street down just for lunch, like in the middle of the day, like from 11 to like 1, and then they'd take the street back. But you need 2 adults outside to monitor it, as well as the NYPD would provide, I guess those NYPD, I don't know, blockades so that the cars wouldn't come through. But we are requesting it just for drop off in the morning, like between 7:30 and 8:30, and then between 2:30 and 3:30 at dismissal.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the committee? Seeing none, I'm going to ask, do I have a motion for supporting the application of School of the Future for the play spaces? Again, with the caveat that this will go to our Transportation Committee before presentation to the full board. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
I'm sorry?
So motioned.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Second.
Thank you. And Julie, could we vote on this, please?
Okay, sorry about that. Renee,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
I didn't see Miss Mary. Joseph,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Tristan,
Yes.
Rob, I didn't see him. Sam, I didn't see. Jamie, Joe,
Yes.
Kim,
Yep.
Evan,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
and Rachel,
Yes.
and July.
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Thank you. So we have passed this motion to support this initiative on behalf of School of the Future, and then pass it to transportation for presentation to the full board. That this is a little bit unusual just because we're crossing over both committees. So thank you, and thank you, Patricia, for coming and speaking to the committee and answering all the questions tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda, moving right along, is Abigail Bessler. She's going to speak with us about the small business tax credit against the commercial rent tax bill. And that has to do with the commercial businesses below 97th Street. It's changed a little bit, I know, so I will turn this over to Abigail to explain the bill and the changes, what has happened since we first heard of this.
Thank you, Renee. Nice to see everyone again. So actually this bill that we just introduced is actually under a new number in the council. So it's intro 2007. But essentially it is related to our past bill in that we've kind of taken on this commercial rent tax issue during COVID especially. And this bill would actually, the old bill was a tax credit given to businesses below a certain size. If you remember, part of it was a full tax credit, meaning full relief, and part of it was sliding scale tax credits based on income, based on your rent. So this bill would actually temporarily suspend and repeal the commercial rent tax in full for businesses with an annual base rent of less than $1 million for just the COVID-19 state of emergency. So it would start on the period that began June 1st, which is the current period of the commercial rent tax that we're in terms of payment. And then it would end the day before. It's very confusing, but basically it would end after whatever is later, the end of the state of emergency by the city or the state. So it's a little bit different than the other bill, but definitely the same aim and more about kind of the urgency of the moment we're in terms of being able to provide direct relief to businesses. And this is one of the ways that the city can actually take action and provide direct relief. So this was sponsored by Councilmember Chin and also Borough President Brewer. And, you know, both of them in a release that went out talked about how there's a desperate need for this, and the need to reevaluate this tax only on Manhattan businesses has never been more dire, because it's just on, you know, stores that have brick and mortar space, which is what's being hit hardest. So the bill would help 5,500 Manhattan businesses. This was actually also part of a larger report that Keith released called Open for Business, Saving Our Small Businesses Post-COVID. I can send around the link for that, but it actually went into a lot of different ideas that we could do at the city, state, and that we should be advocating for at the federal level around helping small businesses. So this is kind of one piece of that plan that Keith has proposed. And yeah, I can answer any other questions, but that's kind of the update, and would obviously be happy to if we could get a supportive statement or resolution from CB5 about the bill.
Absolutely. Thank you, Abigail.
Yeah.
Evan, I see your hand is raised immediately. So I'll go to questions and I'll go right to Evan.
I don't want to overstate my eagerness, but I guess the one question that I had, which came up last time when we discussed this, was, I think for reasons that are understandable to all of us, a lack of data around financial impact to the city by removing this tax, whether temporarily or permanently. I'm guessing the answer is the same, but do we have any sense of impact on budget that removing this tax would have during, a time I know when that budget is already pretty strained?
Yeah. So I don't have the exact impact that it would have based on this year's numbers, but based on 2019 data about the number of businesses who are paying the tax that are below 1 million in rent, that is estimated to cost about 21.3 million per quarter. So, I don't think that we'll see how long the state of emergency lasts, but that's the estimate for 1 quarter, which, obviously also, I think, in order to get this passed, it'll have to be a discussion with, the speaker and other council members about how much, where we want the threshold to be in the bill. And I think we, based on the cost, are open to negotiating it. But I think we wanted to start off with a strong statement that we don't believe that, smaller or medium-sized Manhattan businesses should be paying a tax just for having a space that other boroughs are not paying. And I think we also, wanted to do it for, understanding that the city is in a fiscal crisis, and that we, just passed this budget that took quite a while to get done. We made this going forward. We didn't make this retroactive to the start of the crisis, at least for now. But that is also an effort to make sure that, we're not, we agreed to a budget, and we don't want to put a hole in the budget retroactively. But I think this will have a lot of support, and I think we'll be able to get support from other members, even outside of Manhattan, for this.
Thanks. Abigail, I wonder if it would be worthwhile just to refresh the committee to explain what the tax is below 97th Street in like 2 sentences.
Sure. So it's basically a rate of a 3.9% charge on businesses' annual rent that's only charged to businesses south of 96th Street in Manhattan. So I think it used to be citywide, I believe, and then it was gradually repealed for other boroughs, but it remains for Manhattan.
Thank you. More questions from our committee?
Hey, Renee, sorry, I can't raise my hand, but.
Oh, Joseph, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks. Hey, thanks, Abby, for presenting this. My question is, I guess my question is coming from concern about businesses, like when the state of emergency ends, I assume a lot of them will be trying to just like come back from very far behind in their finances. Was there any thought or discussion around, making this last well after the state of emergency ends, to give businesses some breathing room to try to catch up and invest in the changes they need to make to get back to normal?
Yeah, for sure. I think, and this also got the support of the Hospitality Alliance, which I didn't mention, and the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. I think everyone is aware that a lot of investment needs to be done to save small businesses. And I think that could include a more permanent repeal, or at least relief from this tax, and from other fines for that matter that businesses are paying. And I think we wanted to target this bill so that we could try to get relief now for businesses. And then you could always do an amendment later to extend the bill, which is a lot of the COVID related bills that we've passed as a council are limited to the state of emergency or to like a certain date in the fall, and then potentially will be extended. So I think it was more of a matter of getting the support so that we could get something passed.
Thanks. And I think you said this, but can you remind me who decides when the state of emergency over? Is it the mayor or the governor?
Yeah, so our bill would actually say whichever one goes later, the state or the city. So there both have been declared on the city level and the state level.
Okay, thanks.
Zach.
Sorry, so just to clarify, you said if their base rent's under $1 million, right?
Yeah.
For the year?
1 million a year, that's correct.
So if I'm a small New York City hedge fund with a base rent of under $1 million, I get a tax break?
I mean, I think that's one thing we'll have to negotiate, is whether we want to target the relief, for example, just for businesses on the ground, like ground floor retail, or whether we want, there's different ways to make sure that we're targeting the right people. I think it's just that, businesses in other boroughs, no matter what kind of business you are, aren't paying this. And I do think, our intention is not to help hedge funds that are renting smaller spaces in Manhattan. But I do think that the idea is that we need to come out with something to kind of resolve this unfair.
And the reason I ask is because there are a lot of financial institutions that don't necessarily rent a lot of space, but they rent very expensive space.
Yeah.
Such as, up and down Midtown and 5th and 6th Avenue. And so I completely agree with a rent, some sort of tax break for small restaurants, a bodega, all the mom and pop businesses. But, I think there's if you look at I'm guessing if you looked at a curve as to where the tax revenue flows from, I'm guessing the vast majority of it comes from a small number of businesses that pay a lot in rent per square foot, but maybe under $1 million. Because the average, restaurant that, has a few thousand square feet and pays under $1 million, they may not necessarily be, there may not be much rent, tax revenue generated from the city. And so, I don't know, I just think it bifurcating which businesses benefit and which ones don't could be,
Yeah, I mean, I know that there are in total there are almost 9,000 CRT taxpayers. So there are a lot of businesses that are over $1 million in rent. This is about half or a little more than half. So there are a large number that we are cutting out of this. But one option that we could discuss in the amendment process is, I know in the past, credits for this bill, including our bill, which would have extended that credit, did apply a limit to not only, or the threshold was not only around the the annual rent, but also around the annual income of the business. So, you can kind of get at both of those things. I think we really wanted to just start off with just a clean bill that was helping the most businesses possible in Manhattan because of the urgency of the crisis. And we didn't want to get into all the different thresholds that you could do. But, and I think that makes it a little more complicated, but I think we're open to that discussion, and I'll talk to the council member about that as well.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Joe, Mafia.
I would agree with Zach. I would like to see, I think it's a silly tax to begin with, and it should be done away with. But I think that if you do it the way it's proposed, you would, firms that don't need it would get benefit. So I would like to see it somehow, Taylor. I'd like law firms, accounting firms, probably don't need it right now. There are other entities that retail that certainly need it. And like Zach mentioned, not all retail, not all people who rent retail space need it, like banks.
Thank you, Joe. More questions from the committee?
Renee, I have questions, but I'm not able to raise my hand for some reason.
July.
Thank you. Two questions, Abigail. One is, I'm curious, if we do away with this tax for all businesses in Manhattan, what would be the estimated quarterly revenue cost to the city?
I answered that one. So that one is 21.3 million.
That's for rent, base rent under $1 million, right?
Yeah.
But the question is for all of the
Oh, for all businesses? I think we actually got that figure a few years ago when we looked into that, but that would be a pretty huge hole in the city's budget, which is why we are not proposing that for all businesses in Manhattan.
Okay. If you have that number, would you be willing to share that with the community later on?
Yeah, I have, I can try to, I'll get a calculation for it for 2019.
Thank you. And second question, and maybe the council members in the city have already been discussing it and I'm not aware of, but any discussion around tax responsibilities for landlords? Any tax responsibility relief for property owners?
Oh, for, I know there's discussions at the state level around tax relief, and a lot of the rental relief programs have come out of the state because they have more control over some of those areas, unfortunately, for us. But I know that they are discussing tax relief for various landlords, renters, rent suspension. So I think that discussion is happening more on the state level, I would say.
Thank you. And just a technical question, the extra rent revenue tax, the 3.9% or 3.7%, how is that billed and paid? Is that billed to landlord or the actual renter to the business?
I believe that the actual businesses are the payers of the commercial rent tax, and it's for the amount of space that they have. And then it's paid based on their rent.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. More questions from the committee? Seeing none, I'm going to turn to the attendees and ask that you use your raise hand button if you have a question.
If you're joining us from a phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand.
Seeing nothing from attendees, I'm going to turn it back to the committee. We're going to go into business session and discuss the bill, support of the bill, a resolution in support of the bill, if this is something that we're interested in, with the caveat that both Zach and Joe mentioned, meaning that we look to annual income. Who would like to kick off the discussion? Evan.
Yeah, I would offer my support of the bill, as I did with the previous version of it. I think it made sense when we looked at it 4 months ago, and it makes even more sense today. And I would offer one thought as well on looking to distinguish between businesses who need it and businesses who don't. I think when we start doing that on something related to your rent rather than your income, which this tax does, you lose sight of the real purpose of the tax and the purpose of getting rid of it. I don't think I don't think it would be beneficial to the council member or the purpose of the bill to basically impose some sort of double taxation on companies that are still doing well on their income and thus will be taxed on their income accordingly by trying to also include them in some rent relief bill, which this really is. I just don't think that that makes sense to me conceptually, and trying to parse that out when you're just, when it can be as simple as saying, here's $1 million, it's the threshold, that's the point at which the tax is exempt, versus letting politics seep into, well, which businesses do we think deserve this or not? That makes me a little bit nervous. So I would be strongly in favor of the bill, and I would also be strongly in favor of not trying to parse out who gets the relief and who doesn't, when it's really about the relief on rent and nothing more. And these folks will still be taxed on their income accordingly. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Evan. Any more comments? Would somebody like to speak to Evan's point? He's not in favor necessarily. Joe.
My only comment would be that by leaving the bill as it is, or as it's proposed, it would benefit people who don't necessarily need it. And that's why if it's not based on, if there's no exemption for income or whatever, I just don't think it's I don't think it's necessary benefit for certain tenants.
So I know we've moved out of the question session, but I guess, Abigail, do you mind confirming? I know that the previous iteration of the bill did have an income component to it. I think it was like $5 to $10 million or something to do with that. Does this version just wipe that out completely? So there's no income cap on who this could apply to? It's just about the $1 million in rent?
This is just about the $1 million, but like I said, I think we're open to adding that in an amendment. I think the intent is obviously to help businesses that do need it, and so I'll talk to the council member about that. But yeah, this as it exists, this is just about the 1 million threshold.
Thank you.
Sorry, can you remind us what the income threshold was in the previous version? Because I'll admit I didn't appreciate that this version doesn't have that at all. I thought we were talking about businesses under $10 million like last time in income, but, or was it 5?
Yeah, I think there was an income, and I'd have to also see what what number of businesses we'd be talking about for who would be under this kind of like Venn diagram. An income higher than that and rent lower than 1 million. But yeah, I can look into, I think it was 10 million, but it was different, different incomes at different thresholds. I think under the original Gorodnick small business tax credit proposal that we were expanding upon. So I think it was like 5 million for certain things, and then a sliding scale credit from 5 to 10 million. So it was different. It was kind of complicated, but it was different limits.
Thank you. Zach, your hand is raised.
Thanks. I just want to, kind of in response to Evan's comment, understand where you're coming from in terms of double taxation issue. But in my view, the spirit of the bill is to help companies that were most directly impacted by COVID. Those whether it's a movie theater, whether it's a small kind of a restaurant, small retail operation, there are so many investment firms, mine included, that have rent under $1 million, whose businesses have not been impacted by this, because they don't sell widgets and they don't sell meals. They make fees on the $4 or $5 or $6 billion of capital they manage, who can very well afford to pay this. And so I don't think giving them a break necessarily is, in my opinion, in the spirit of the bill, which is why I would support something with some sort of revenue or income cap.
Thanks, Zach. Joe, your hand is raised.
Abigail, a possible solution might be to limit it to certain SIC codes, certain industry codes, so that and have no income limitation. So if a retailer would get it, a financial institution would have a different SIC code, an investment company would have a different SIC code, and you already have that in your on the tax returns. So it would probably be an easy way to implement this.
Thank you. Any more comments? Comments from the committee?
Yes, I would just like to add, I agree with Joe and Zach's comments. And another way of approaching it might be considering number of employees, or rather revenue per employee within the business. But I understand how challenging that can be, that approach can become. But I think that will really, paint a more clear picture of what type of business it is, and how many jobs it is generating, and how many people who will be indirectly benefited from this tax relief.
Thank you, July. Any other comments? What I'm hearing is a general support of the bill with two different philosophies about how to implement. One, thinking that it's good the way it stands. Another one, Zach and Joe and July, thinking that there should be some parsing of the type of small businesses that get the relief. I'd like to hear from a few other members of the committee and get a sense of what they're thinking about this.
Hi, Renee, can I chime in?
Joseph, please.
Yeah,
do.
sorry, it's still the raise hand thing. I'd just like to say that I agree with trying to parse it in some way, keeping it as simple as possible. I think Joe's idea sounds very straightforward. You don't want it to be administratively difficult to actually implement this. So, I think maybe we could use language, that says that we would like to parse out, the businesses that have been directly impacted by the COVID pandemic, and, say that, we leave it to the council to find the simplest way to do that. I don't know if we need to figure that out, but I do like the idea of keeping it simple.
Great, thank you, Joe. Charles.
I agree with Joe. I think that a way of endorsing the bill and encouraging the council to look at opportunities to focus the need on businesses that need it the most would be a good position to go.
Okay. Any other comments from the committee?
Yeah, Renee, I was just going to say, I actually completely agree with what Joe and Chuck just said. I think it seems like, Abigail, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there is some expected negotiations to happen to even get it implemented. So I'm definitely comfortable with supporting the idea in general, with some of the language that's just been brought up. And I imagine there'll be some caveats kind of thrown in there to get it passed.
Thanks, Rachel. Last comments from anyone? Okay, so what I'm hearing is that we're in favor of the bill generally, but we would like to see language that indicates there's some parsing between who is impacted by COVID and ensuring that they are the ones that receive this relief. So whatever the council member can do to sort of make sure that this is focused on those who need it. I think that's what I'm hearing from the committee. Do I hear support for a resolution in favor of that response, that we're in favor of the bill generally, with the caveat that we would like it focused on those businesses that truly require it as a result of COVID, and that it belongs to the council member and to the council to figure out how to parse that specifically? Robert, I missed you. Go ahead.
No problem. I just raised my hand. I just wanted to see if, when we're talking about focusing on those that need it, I mean, are we talking about needs testing or means testing, or are we just kind of saying we want to make sure that it does go to people in need, but we're not suggesting how that should be done necessarily?
I think that's what I was hearing from the committee, that there's some, I know that Evan spoke about the income, an income threshold. I don't think that we're specifically advocating one way or the other of doing the parsing. We're suggesting that if the bill has been introduced to provide relief to businesses that have suffered because of COVID, that are paying this commercial rent tax, then it should be focused to those players and not necessarily, as Zach pointed out, to maybe a hedge fund that doesn't necessarily need or require the relief because COVID has not impacted their business. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, as long as, I think it's dangerous to start suggesting how it should be done, given all of our layman capacity. But I think it's right to include some degree of needs or means testing, because I think that's often been a failure of some programs in the past to really make sure that it's going to folks who most need it.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. So do I hear a motion in favor of a resolution to support the bill with language that says we do believe there should be some way or some parsing of businesses that require the relief as a result of COVID, and that's, we want it to be directed to those businesses and not necessarily to businesses as a whole.
I motion to support a bill with that open-ended caveat, yes.
I'd second it.
Okay, then we will move to a vote. Julie?
Renee?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Zach?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Joe Mafia?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
And July?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Abigail, for coming. Thank you very much. We're going to get you back hopefully at the end of August for the rest of the remaining ideas that you're looking at for small businesses, because we're really interested in hearing those. But for this, the resolution is passed unanimously. It will go to the board, but that's not happening until September. But thank you.
Okay, and I'll put the link to our report in the chat here so you can all look through that too. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, our last item for tonight is the consideration of a resolution that was created by all of you during our conversation on the NYPD and the budget. This resolution was Trojan work by Joseph Frewer. Rob Isaacs, Peter Webb, and July Yang were also involved. Thank you very much for all of your hard work. They took our conversation, our comments, our determinations, and put them into the resolution that you all received via email. And basically, this resolution reflects the view of all of you, the committee, with regard to the budget and the NYPD, and recognizes that the budget itself is a statement of values. It provides the core principles that every single person articulated as a committee. That includes the efficient use of funds, equal opportunity, budget alignment with the purpose and mission of each agency, diversity, transparency and accountability, ethical and legal behavior, and trust and respect. The resolution itself demands honest communication from our electeds regarding budget decisions, a request for a targeted plan to reduce the NYPD overtime spending, a request for the mayor and the city council to provide a plan for the transition of school safety agents and school crossing guards to the DOE, as well as a report on the shift of homeless services from NYPD to DHS to figure out how that's being done, what's being done. We also asked that OMB standardize its reporting for comparisons. You will recall even the presentation that we had, it's very hard to parse and really hard to get into the weeds and understand the budget reporting process. And we finally reiterate our firm commitment for the reconsideration of the role of the NYPD within the city of New York. I trust that you've all received and read the proposed resolution. Is anyone not received that or not seen it? Okay, again, I want to thank Joseph particularly, and then Rob, July, for their work, and Pete on the resolution. And I'd like to open it up to questions. I'm seeing no questions. Any questions? No questions. Okay, I'm going to move to the attendees before we go into comments. Any questions from our attendees?
Hi, I had a question. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
We can. Hi.
Hi, this is Chris Clark. I'm a member of this community board, but not of this committee, obviously. And if this is not the appropriate time to be discussing this, obviously I'll have the opportunity to bring it up at the actual meeting. But I have been looking at the resolution. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions about some specific language that it seems, it's sort of tough looking at the edit history to see if it was actually removed or just proposed that it be removed. Okay. But there was a paragraph towards the end of the resolution calling for city council and the mayor, I believe, to quote, oh, here it is, to draw up a formal plan from the mayor and city council to enable and require NYPD to dismiss rather than keep on modified duty officers who have committed illegal and or unethical behavior. And it goes on. Was that indeed struck from the resolution, or is that still in there?
It's not in the resolution. That was not something that I had in my notes as something that we had decided upon as a committee. Certainly, if we can discuss it here and add it into the resolution, add it back to the resolution. When I went through my notes, that particular piece of it, although it obviously it's very popular, it's in the media, it's something that's happening, I did not have it in my notes as commentary from members of the committee. So I struck it from the language. Is that something that you're proposing and would like to discuss now?
If it's appropriate for me to propose that, I certainly think that it is in keeping with the broader spirit of the resolution and is specifically, I think, an actionable and important concrete step when it comes to how the NYPD spends its money.
Okay, I'd like to hear. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Comments from the committee, questions from the committee on that issue. Panelists, where am I? Zach.
I agree with Chris's point. I would be in favor of including that in the resolution.
Okay.
And just a second point, it's a question for folks that wrote this. Did you take into account the overall size of the NYPD or the type of kind of combat style equipment that they use for to deal with protesters?
Again, we did not, that was not an issue, I don't think, that came up during the conversation, our original conversation. Again, we can add that to the resolution here if that's something that the committee would like to discuss and add to the resolution. The purpose right now is to read the resolution as presented. It's a discussion. I believe it reflects our conversation. We have the opportunity right now before adopting it to add to it. So if that's something that our committee would like to add to the conversation and add to the resolution, certainly I hear what you're saying. And I would like to hear from other committee members about that issue. Our conversation about this issue was huge. It was far ranging. It touched on the NYPD and the budget and a whole host of things. So as I said, Joseph and his group did an incredible job of putting it all together. When this was given to me, I looked through my notes to very specifically reflect what I heard from our committee members, because I didn't want to include something that hadn't been there at the outset of our conversation, but certainly we can discuss it now and add it to the resolution. So thank you, Zach. Do I have some comments and questions from people on the committee?
I do, Renee.
Oh, Joseph, go ahead.
I think I just wanted to ask Zach, because I think I might not have gotten that note, but I think I do remember you potentially bringing that up at our earlier conversation, this question of, I guess, their equipment and kind of the military style, I guess, like weaponry tactics. What I don't remember is whether, did he bring it up now kind of to put in a provision that references the cost of that and to talk about limiting NYPD's ability to spend money on that sort of equipment? Or was this a broader point about kind of the tactic that the tactics that they use with protesters in general?
You know, I'll be honest, I don't fully remember every aspect of our conversation, which was, you know, at this point a month or two ago. But I think both of those, I mean, so as first, I think the resolution is great as it stands. And if that's kind of what everyone could agree to, then I think, you know, that would be great. But I would be supportive of adding points that address both of those issues, the cost of that kind of equipment, and secondly, the, you know, the measures they take with it.
Thanks. I mean, I'd be really supportive of including a provision personally that includes a mention of the cost of this type of kind of military grade equipment. I tried to stay away from kind of like tactics and behavior because I kind of felt like that could be a whole nother resolution, and I was trying to just put as clean as possible, just kind of like anything that didn't have some tie into the budget. I kind of figured maybe we should do something in collaboration with public safety. Or just have a separate resolution just about that. So that's the only reason I didn't include the tactics in there.
Understood. You know, I agree with the first point.
More comments from and more questions from the committee? What do we think about Chris's point? Charles.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Chris, for the comment. I think it's appropriate that struck language. I don't remember what we talked about originally. That some form of that struck language be in this resolution, because it does have a budget effect, and the resolution comes at this issue from a budget perspective. I wonder if you would be if it would meet your goal to have the committee and then the board, if it's approved by the board, request a formal plan to enable the NYPD to dismiss officers who have committed illegal. So we wouldn't put in, rather than keep on modified duty, so it would say to dismiss. And then I wonder if it would be satisfactory to delete from the already deleted paragraph the sentence on the status quo. It's I think it's certainly a strong call to action by the committee. I don't know that it adds anything to our purpose in the resolution, and it's going to attract a lot of attention by labeling it a gross misuse.
My initial reaction, and thank you for that suggestion. My initial reaction is that I think that would get at the same purpose. I would ask that we add in the term desk duty. So rather than keep on modified duty, AKA desk duty, I think having that language in there is important just for understanding it in the terms that we normally hear used to describe police protocol when it comes to discipline. But I think that removing the sort of editorializing, which I agree with, by the way, but the editorializing about the status quo wouldn't, affect the outcome of that language. I'm curious to hear what everyone else thinks, if there are any disagreements.
Comments from the committee regarding that statement? Charles, Chuck.
Sorry, I meant to lower my hand. Nothing else.
Okay, Joseph, I see your hand. Do I see your hand? Joseph, was that you or that was Chuck?
I think that was me pulling my hand back down.
Okay. Other comments, other thoughts about the
Because
resolution?
I did not understand your response to Chuck's comment. Can you just say it again? And I'm sorry if I'm the only person who did not understand.
No, no problem. I have no problem saying it again. And I'm referencing something that I'm looking at in writing. And so my comments might be sort of hard to follow. As I understood it, Chuck's comment was about removing certain phrasing. And all I wanted to say was that I think the phrase desk duty is important to include in the resolution, just as a sort of plain language explanation of what the current protocol is and what this is in contrast to. And so I had a sort of convoluted way of making that point. Does that help clear it up?
Yes, so you're saying police officers who need to be reprimanded for, I think the term was criminal behaviors, should not be reassigned to desk duties.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And specifically, this language would be requesting that the mayor and city council take that action.
Can they?
It would be taking action to enable NYPD, enable and require NYPD. So this would be a request that we're making to city council and the mayor rather than making to NYPD directly.
Right, but I guess the question is, are they legally, is that within their legal jurisdiction to do that?
Right, I think what July is asking is normally members of the police department who are being investigated, they have their own disciplinary system and hearing system, their own sort of oath system that they go through with their judge, a judge who then determines whether I think things are substantiated or not substantiated. I think July's question is whether, are you asking for a change? Are we asking and discussing a change to that system, to the disciplinary system within the NYPD? Is that what you're getting at?
This is Chuck. I'll jump in here. I think that is what we're getting at least that's what I interpret it as. In July, I think that the city council has the authority to either enable or require the department to come up with a program like that. We're not specifying what the program would be. We're asking them to exercise their authority to put that kind of program in place.
Thank you, Chuck and Renee. My worry on that point then, if we're asking for the procedure be modified, my worry becomes it will on some level deter current police officers to respond in their daily activities, duties, and will cause a delay in emergency situations. But I certainly understand, Chris, the merit of your point. I guess I don't know how to balance that.
Any other comments or thoughts about this? Questions?
I have a comment.
Who's speaking?
Joseph, sorry.
Okay, Joseph.
I think, I guess my response to your point, July, about officers, declining to respond. I think, just like the NYPD is, it's a department that works at the pleasure of the mayor. It's a city agency. I think if a change in the policy that they implement causes individual officers to decide to slow down their work or not respond, I would think that would be insubordination, and those officers should also be disciplined accordingly and or terminated, right? And we hire officers who will, conform to the policies that the city places upon them. So I guess my opinion would be that I wouldn't mind if certain officers didn't respond, because I think that would be creating a force that we want.
What does the committee think about that? Any thoughts? I'm not seeing any hands.
Renee, it's Chuck. I didn't raise my hand, but I think that Joseph, the devil is in the details there on how many officers that would be and where that balance comes out. And I think that the value of the proposed resolution is that it doesn't require us to resolve that balance. It puts that back into the council and the police department where it belongs. So July, I think the concern you have, July, is a very good one. And I think that we are essentially amplifying that by asking the council and the department to come up with a process. We're not prescribing a result, just a procedure.
July, your thought about that, or anyone's? I'd like to hear from people I haven't heard, get a sense of what they're thinking about these two.
Well, perhaps we can add within that same sentence, a changed procedure in relation to reassignment, but ensuring that it does not reduce the level of service from the PD. Something in that line. That the change in procedure does not deter current police officers in responding to their duties. Which I think is really hard to do, but I'd be okay with that kind of language.
So you're saying you agree that they'd not be assigned to desk duties, but whatever process is adopted, it ensures that the level of service remains the same, and it ensures that police officers continue to attend to their duties. Is that what I'm hearing from you, July?
Be not reassigned to desk duties after due process.
Okay. I think that the term going back to desk duties, I understand what you're saying, but modified is sort of the term of art that's used for police officers when they're being sanctioned, if you will. Do we want desk duties? And I'm perfectly happy to keep that language. I'm just throwing that out there.
Renee, maybe we can say modified duties, open parentheses, e.g. desk duty, and just throw it in a parenthetical.
Is that Tristan?
Yes.
Okay. Good idea, Tristan. Thank you. Okay. So I just want to go back and round up on Zach's point regarding the militarization and the tactics. Are we in agreement that the issue of tactics, we're going to leave off this resolution and very specifically speak to budget? And then the question becomes, I wasn't clear how we felt about looking at the cost of the materials, the military type materials. Could we go back to that for a minute? Comments? Charles, Chuck.
Sorry to talk so much. I wonder on that one if we could say that the concern would be about the cost of acquiring and maintaining that military style equipment. Clearly states it in the context of a budget, but goes to the issue.
I understand. I see that. That's
I'd be supportive of that. And I think limiting it just to budgetary concerns does make sense. So eliminating that first point that deals with method.
okay. All right, I have both of those points. Are there any other issues that arise for people, any questions with regard to the proposed resolution? Any other questions? The attendees really don't have access necessarily. This is a resolution in support. I gave you the outline of what the resolution said and the core values that the resolution sort of wanted to put a stake in the ground about vis-a-vis the NYPD. I don't know if the attendees have further questions about the specific language or about the resolution itself. I'm going to turn it over to the attendees for questions. Seeing none, I'm going to go back.
Renee, I have a question. I have a comment.
Okay, I'm going to go back to us, Joe. I'm going to go back in. Now we're in business session. We're going to have our comments. Joe, go ahead.
Okay. Just two comments. The last whereas paragraph on page 2 or 3. 2.
Okay, I'm bringing it up.
It says, want me to share my screen or something?
Please do. I don't know if Luke could do that wizardry for us.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Luke.
Luke, do you have it?
Pulling it up now.
Okay.
Okay.
You said the last paragraph, right?
The last whereas on page 2.
Sorry.
Right before the core principles. There you go. So in reading that paragraph, it says, to that end, CB5 believes that it stands on future New York City budgets. And is the intent here to narrow where these core principles apply? Because I don't know if I feel like we're saying New York City, the police department and certain other services, I just think it should be all future budgets. I would not single out the police department here in this, but this is a core principles for all New York City budgets, all agencies, because I think the provision of other services that provide the city's health, safety, and well-being, there might be an agency that doesn't fit those criteria. So I think I'm interpreting it that it's limiting how these core principles are to be applied. And I don't think that that's the intent. And I suggest that my friendly amendment would be that essentially after New York City budgets and strike out the police department and other services, and the provision of other services.
Actually, Joe, I think that's a very good point, and I actually agree with you. The intent wasn't really to narrow. I think the core principles were really to apply as a touchstone as we go forward and look at budgets going forward, and that would apply to everything that we look at. So I actually agree with what you're saying. I want to hear some other committee members.
And then I have a second point.
Okay, 1 second. Can you hold it for 1 second? And
Hope I remember it.
Point. Joseph, do you have, you were very instrumental. You penned this. Do you have a comment to this?
No, I appreciate the feedback. And Renee, I agree with you. I think Joe's right about the intent of it. And I think if we strike that part, we can avoid confusion. So that sounds good to me.
Thank you. Any other comments? Does anyone else have any problem with doing that? Any comment about it? For some reason, Luke, I can't see raised hands. So maybe Luke, if you see the raised hands, does anyone else have a comment or issue with changing that language? Because I think the intent was exactly as Joe said. All right. We're going to move on to Joe. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to Joe's second point.
We have a raised hand from Kimberly.
Oh, Kimberly, I'm sorry.
Hey there. My hand isn't raised to comment on that, though. I agree with the change.
Thank you. All right. We'll come back to you. I know you have a raised hand about something else. We'll go back to Joe's second point. Joe?
Okay. And then on the core principles, I think they're well written. I agree with them all. I do think we should add one more principle, or revise the second principle. I think if it says efficient use of funds, I think we should emphasize the principle that the city budget should be used to streamline, I don't have my words together, I'm having a Joe Biden moment, to streamline and to leverage technology to be more efficient in the delivery of services.
To be more efficient.
This is the efficient
Is
use
that a
of
second
funds.
point? I'm thinking that might be a second, like a third, maybe number 3 in terms of the core principles. I'm thinking, you know, I like the sentiment. I'm thinking it might be a third core principle. Could I get comments from the rest of the committee regarding that statement?
We do have a hand raised by Kimberly, but Kimberly, I don't know if this is still your other comment.
Any comments? Any comments on adding an additional core principle that the city leverage technology to be more efficient in their use of funding?
In their delivery of services.
Okay, more efficient in
With
their delivery. Okay.
I guess with the goal of saving saving the budget or reducing the budget.
Right. I think a reoccurring theme of this committee has always been saving funds and looking for efficiency. So I think that's right in line with things that we've done again and again and again. But I want to hear from the committee.
Renee, can I chime in? Joseph? Yes, great. Yeah, I think that's a great addition. I do think number 2, the efficient use of funds might be a good place to add that. Because I see it as being aligned with that theme, right? You can maybe say, you know, take what's existing there, and just add kind of a clause about leveraging technology to be more efficient with the delivery, because I think it all kind of goes under the same umbrella in my mind.
Okay. Any other comments?
Then I have one more.
Joe?
I have one more addition. Are we finished on that? Comments on the number 2? What I would like to, I think there should be a core principle about fiscal responsibility or balanced budgets.
Okay. Do you want to expand on that?
Yes, I agree with all of the statements, but while the city is developing its budget, maybe it's part of number 6, maybe it's part of number 1. They should always strive to balance the budget.
I think that gets, in my opinion, it gets a little too political, just because balancing a budget is a very political process. Because that just, you break it down into that's raising taxes versus cutting services. And I think it just opens up a huge can of worms.
And I would argue that, yes, it is political, but I think it's important. It should be a core value when you're developing a budget, not that you're going to automatically, it's not a constitutional limit, it's just a core principle that they should try to balance the budget.
Okay, Rachel, I see your hand.
Yeah, just gonna say, I thought it was already like a legal requirement in the city for them to have a balanced budget. I'm pretty sure it is. So I feel like I don't want us to like stray away from the core of what this is trying to achieve. And I think that's kind of already something that's required. So I just want to make sure we stay focused here.
Okay, I see Kim's hand is raised.
Yeah, my hand is still raised from before.
Go ahead.
But I kind of echo what Rachel was saying on that point.
Okay. So I'm hearing that we're not in favor particularly of adding a balanced budget to our core principles to strive for a balanced budget. Would anyone else like to weigh in on this? I want to hear from the committee.
I mean, I get Renee, hey, sorry, it's still Kim.
Yeah.
I don't know if like the word, responsibly allocating funding is something like just adding that, but agree with Rachel as far as like the balance of the budget already being required.
Okay.
I agree with Joe's point. I just
you July?
think,
okay.
Yeah, it's July. I agree with Joe's point. I just think proposing a balanced budget and running a balanced budget, not just proposing, but ensuring that you, at the end of the year, the actually is in line with the proposed is super important. But I think in light of COVID, that's probably hard to achieve.
Okay.
And I see that Rachel is definitely right, that it is part of the New York City budget process that it's the budget should be balanced.
Okay. So I think then we can leave that out of our core principle. Kim, do you still have your hand up? Do you have your hand up again?
No, I just have my hand up to comment on something separate when we close out Joe's comments.
Okay. Any other comments? I think we're putting to bed the issue of balanced budget. We'll move on to the next issue. Kim.
So mine is just more of a comment, and the most important thing to me during this conversation has always been the reinvestment in community and youth services. And I just wanted to remark that I thought that was very eloquently and articulately included in this iteration of the resolution. Of course, I'd love to hijack it and include even more language about it, but I recognize that's not necessarily the purpose. But I just wanted to make that comment that I felt good about how it was included. So thanks for that, team.
That is Joseph and his crew, July and Rob and Pete, who worked on that, and Joseph was the lead on that for us. So yeah, they did a fantastic job. Any more comments? I think that we are going to, I think what I'm hearing is that people are not in favor of adding a balanced budget piece to it, but we are in favor of amending efficient use of funds to include leverage tech to be more efficient in the delivery of services. I think we have the language around modification, desk duty, and putting back in the struck clause regarding the NYPD actions for criminal and insubordination. And then we're leaving out any mention of tactics, but we will discuss and ask about the cost of equipment, the mention of military grade equipment, both the cost for keeping, obtaining, and maintaining that equipment. That's what I'm hearing for modifications to this resolution. Does anyone have anything else to add? Any other comments about the resolution? I'd love to hear from people who haven't really had a chance to speak, if they'd like to say anything to the resolution. Okay. I don't see any more raised hands. I'm going to ask for a motion on the resolution with the caveat that we will make the changes as discussed. Do I see a motion in favor?
So moved.
And do I have a
Second.
second? Okay. We will move to a vote.
Renee,
Yes.
I'm a yes. Zach,
Yes.
Joseph,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Tristan. Okay,
Tristan,
he said yes, right? But
Yeah.
he left. Rob? Did Rob go away as well?
No, Rob's here. Just had to get off
Okay.
mute. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm a
great.
yes.
Thank you. Joe,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Evan,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
and July.
Yes.
Fabulous. It looks like we have a unanimous vote in favor of the resolution that again will present to the full board, which will not happen until September. I want to thank everybody tonight for really making time. I know this was not a regularly scheduled meeting, and so I appreciate all of your interest and your time and your thoughtfulness in making time to be here. Thank you very much. We're going to be back in 2 weeks. Some of the issues, I just want to say, some of the issues that were raised, like the tactical issue, we can revisit. So just because it's not in this resolution does not mean that we have totally put it to bed. We can look at those issues at another time. We have many more meetings to come. What's going to be upcoming with our next meeting, which again is in August, we're going to be looking at small business issues and issues of the community, particularly vis-a-vis the homeless issues, some of the issues that have been coming up around that. So that's coming up at our next meeting. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. And again, thank you for attending. We're at the end of our meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee.
Hi, thanks everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you so much.